My kitchen is a mess. I got a new air fryer that we are testing out. I can't give you a review yet because I haven't tried it enough to tell you if it's any good, but I'll keep you posted because it's like all stainless, like fingers crossed, it's exactly what I want. Today I wanted to do a short video that talks about one of my favorite, really affordable, versatile cuts of beef, and that's the chuck. The problem is, all of these are considered chuck. And so when you go to the grocery store and you see chuck on sale, Laura told me to buy chuck, it's on sale. What are you supposed to buy? Which one of those are you supposed to pick out? And how are you supposed to cook it? That's exactly what I'm gonna cover for you today. So we're gonna break down all of these different types of chuck, how you're supposed to cook each one, and what to look for at the grocery store. This video is sponsored by Element, and they have a really cool update, which is that their chocolate caramel is back permanently. It used to be available in their medley pack, and now it's like a full-time flavor, which is awesome because it is Chris's favorite for sure. He mixes it with some iced coffee in the mornings and gets like a nice salted caramel chocolate coffee. It's also perfect mixed with some hot water or warm milk, and the kids love it for like a hot chocolate replacement. If you don't know what I'm talking about, Element is an electrolyte drink mix that's really formulated for people who are doing low carb, keto, carnivore. It's sodium based, so it's not gonna have junk of sugar and fillers and other artificial stuff that you don't want. The flavored versions are sweetened with stevia, but I typically use the unflavored version, which is just sodium, magnesium, potassium, nothing else in it, and no sweeteners. If you want to get a free sample pack, you can test out all these flavors that I've mentioned. You can go to drinkelement.com/LauraSpath and you can get a free sample pack with any purchase. Thanks to Element for sponsoring this video. We are going to save my favorite chuck cut. That's hard to say. We are going to save my favorite chuck cut for last, but we are going to start off with the most common and the one that you can find in virtually every single grocery store across the country, and that is the chuck roast. This one also goes on really awesome sales. The prices that I paid today, I probably wouldn't have bought these to stock up my freezer on a regular basis because they are on much better deal on a regular basis. I just wanted to have them for this video. So always look for really good sales when it comes to chuck. Your basic chuck roast typically looks like this. It's gonna be a couple inches thick, a big old slab of meat, and like, what are you even supposed to do with this? Before we get there, I want to explain to you how to pick out a good one from the grocery store. When I look at a chuck roast, I instantly in my mind label it as a good one or a bad one. And here's what a good one looks like. I want something that has two very distinct muscles. So I have this big muscle on top and then this other group of muscles on the bottom, and it is all separated by this piece of fat. This is a good one to me. It looks almost like two different pieces of meat just stuck together with some fat. Same for this one. We see this nice big muscle on top, and then we have a big fat strip in the middle, and then a good set of muscles on the bottom. So these are some really good examples of what I'm looking for some good chuck roast. Alternatively, look at this piece of meat. It kind of just looks like a big old mixture of meats. There's not really any clear defined sections. There's not any great marbling in it. It's gonna be a lot tougher. When you are picking out your chuck roast from the store, don't look for one that's just this big old hunk of meat that you can't really tell which way your things are going. You're gonna look for one that has two separate pieces of muscle separated by this really beautiful piece of fat. Now that you bought a good one, the question comes, how am I supposed to cook it? Honestly, my husband will just grill one of these up and eat it like a steak, but it's pretty tough. For somebody like me, I'm not gonna do it that way. Most people are gonna enjoy this best when it is cooked low and slow, where you can break down all of these muscles and this connective tissue, and it's gonna be nice and tender. The best way to do that is to braise it, which you can do in the Instant Pot, in the crock pot. I like to do it in a Dutch oven with some broth. I will season it with salt and maybe a little bit of pepper, sear it on all sides, and then cook it low and slow in the oven at 350 for probably 3.5 hours until all of this breaks down and is nice and tender. You also can sear it and then leave it in your crock pot all day as well. A really fun thing to do with this, and you could cook several at the same time if you have a smoker, is to smoke it around 225 degrees for a while until it hits an internal temperature of 204 degrees. Treat it like a brisket, and then at the end, it's gonna get really nice and shredded. If you've seen my YouTube short, I have a poor man's burnt ends that I use a chuck roast for, and it's so good. You could do that in the oven or you could do it in the smoker. Next up, we have the chuck steak, which is literally a chuck roast cut in half. This is the same thing. Look at those two separate muscle pieces divided by a piece of fat. I used the same technique for picking out this one that I did for picking out the thicker roast. This one is just cut in half. It's actually pretty thin. It's about 1 inch thick. And Chris would eat this just like a regular steak. He's gonna get the grill screaming hot, or you could do a cast iron skillet and cook it to medium rare. He's gonna sit there with his big old knife and a cutting board and enjoy it. And it's gonna be a little tougher than your traditional ribeye or New York strip. It's probably a little tough for me. I would choose several other cuts before I would choose this one. Actually, of all of the chuck cuts, personally, this is the one that I would buy the least, simply because unless you're gonna put several of them in the crock pot and braise it like the chuck roast, for me, there's really no other reason to get it. It can be a really great budget-friendly way to get a giant steak. Just know if you're doing that, it is gonna be a little tougher. Don't overcook it. Next, we have the Chuck Country Style Ribs. If this looks familiar, it's because it is literally just this top section and it's cut sideways, which means that it is going to be tougher and it is designed to be braised. So this is called country ribs. You're gonna cook it the same way that you would some kind of like boneless short rib. You could put it in your crock pot, Instant Pot, all the good things. We want it nice and slow so that you can then shred it apart at the end. Okay, we have some show and tell. Well, I show you my favorite of all the chucks, which is the chuck eye. This is often called the poor man's ribeye because basically, like, we see the ribeye here. When the ribeye ends, you get the chuck. So the chucks that we want and where you get this really tender chuck eye, which is basically I think it's more tender than a ribeye, arguable, but you're getting that from down here, right where the ribeye ends, and then you get the chuck.
So those bad roasts that we were talking about earlier would be on this end because the eye kind of disappears as a muscle because it tapers down. That ribeye comes across and tapers down, so it goes away as it gets further towards the neck.
And this chuck roast that has the good chuck eye on it, actually look, does this piece look familiar here? This little bottom is our chuck eye. We have our chuck roast from earlier. Down here, this bottom muscle separation, this is our chuck eye. And again, we're looking right there in between the two pieces of meat. Thanks, babe. Picking out a good chuck eye, I really just look for something that's even across, has lots of marbling. I love looking for this little like extra circle piece. There we go. That little circle piece to me is gonna be nice and tender. This one too is really good and marbled. I did buy this one anyway. Here, look, if you can see the back, to me, all of this flecking on the back is the fat that's coming off. It means it's gonna be so tender. And I can see this eye here. That's like a really good part of a ribeye. So even though this one you see kind of is a little bit thin and a little uneven, it was so worth it to me. It just looked too good. I needed to have it. I'm gonna cook this on a grill, in a cast iron. Some of you cook steaks in an air fryer. Do that too if you want. But however you cook your steaks, just get it nice and medium rare and it's gonna be unbelievable. Whenever these on sale, I stock up as much as I can. This price today was $9.99 a pound. I would normally not pay that. I can usually find it for $4, $5, $6 a pound and I will stock up. Here's what happens though every time I talk about chuck eyes. Everybody says, I can't find these in the store. I don't even know where to buy them. My grocery store doesn't carry it. No stores in my area carry chuck eye. Don't worry, I got you covered. Remember our chuck roast? Buy this chuck roast. Here we go, I'm gonna touch all this meat. I'm gonna eat it. Buy this chuck roast and then you can literally separate it. Here is my chuck eye. It's nice and thick. I probably could even cut this in half and get 2 chuck eyes out of it. This is a chuck eye. You can't find a chuck eye in a grocery store. Buy a chuck roast that looks like this one and you can do this. Now, what are you gonna do with this piece that's left over? We are going to cut it into strips, chunks, a couple inches wide, and you are gonna get boneless chuck ribs. You could still take a couple of these and braise them, cook them like a chuck roast, put them in a Dutch oven, all the same things we talked about. Or you can make yourself some boneless short ribs out of it. Now what? I think that's all I got. I hope this was helpful. I gotta wash my hands now. We're gonna be eating good for the next few days on all of this. Let me know if that was helpful. Are there any other cuts or types of meat that you need some advice or some help figuring out what to do with or finding in your store? This has been a really fun journey for us to figure all this out and figure out how we like to eat meat and eat on a budget, and I love sharing that with you. If you want to see more content from me, you can come find me on Locals. You guys know the drill. Thanks for subscribing.